Hey, and welcome back. It's the Scaling Secrets podcast from AutoPR, and Mr. Erik Borreson is here from m-files.com. Now, Erik is all about global customer success, and he's a services leader. He's all about building, scaling, motivating, and retaining exceptional teams. Erik has a software background. The company he's in right now is m-files.com. He is the VP of U.S. Services and Strategic Engagement. And he also used to live in Japan doing other cool software projects and a priori technologies. So we're going to find out some scaling secrets from Erik and what he's learned from jumping into these cool software projects. At the moment, M-Files helps knowledge workers work smarter. They've revolutionized the way knowledge workers automate their processes, from document creation and management to workflow automation. It works with AI, which is always exciting. So, Erik, how the heck are you today?
I am great. Thanks for asking, Robert, and thanks for having me on.
Very nice having you. And so we said a few things, we introduced you, but what did I leave out? What are you all about and what gets you excited?
Yeah, and like you said, I've worked at a couple of software companies over the last 12 years. At A Priori Technologies, I joined when it was still pretty early on in terms of its growth. So there was only 40 people in the company when I joined and started leading the services organization. Only four people when I in the services organization when I started, and then grew that to over 30 people globally. Um, Took a role leading all aspects of customer success. So not just services, customer success management, support, project management, implementation, and also a lot of partner enablement and partner management as well. So that's kind of what gets me excited is building and scaling services organizations that are really meant to drive adoption of the software solutions.
Well, exciting. And so having all those sorts of tasks seems like you have to know your stuff and have to have a kind of like attention to detail and have people skills. But that's just what I'm saying from someone on the outside looking in. Like, what do you think makes you sort of really good at this? And when you see other people, like maybe if they're not so good with the project management or the software, like what are people lacking? What are these skills that are needed?
Yeah, I think a big one is being flexible and adaptable as well. So obviously, when I was at A Priori, the needs of the company and our customers and the services organization changed quite a bit from being, a 40-person company with four people in services to, 200 plus people globally. So I think that being adaptable and being able to really assess the situation and know, okay, at this stage of the company and our customers' maturity, what is really needed, right? And making sure that you're aligning kind of your hiring strategy, right? What your ideal kind of profile for a implementation engineer is when you're earlier on, very likely is going to be very different than later in the growth of the company. So I would say that adaptability, and then also just kind of empathy with customers, I think is any time that you're in a customer facing role, that's going to be a really valuable skill.
And this is the sort of topic that comes up a lot in this podcast when we talk to people that they like grown a company and they're sort of like the pivot points where you have your thinking when you're one size, and then when you get to another size, maybe you yourself are no longer a good fit for the company or some of the people on your team. And that's interesting to think about how these things evolve. And so so speaking of that, you've grown this company. Like, what are the sort of problems that you've been working on? Like, has there been a problem with like the customer, software itself, the team, all the above? Like, what's kind of the interesting challenges you come across?
Yeah, I think there's probably two main challenges that I've come across both at my time at A Priori and then also here at M Files. So the first one is just the profitability of the services organization. And again, when you're very early on in the growth of the company, that may not be that important, right? What's more important is that your early customers are being successful, and you may invest quite a bit from a services standpoint to achieve that. And then as you get later in the growth of the company, that profitability will come into focus. So I think just setting yourself up so that you can be a profitable, or at least a break even services organization. That was always something that I was kind of trying to assess what the expectations of the executive team and of the board were, and making sure that we were in a good position to meet or exceed those expectations. And then the other one I would say is really the time to value. So both A Priori and M Files are subscription software companies. And any time that you have a subscription software company, it's really important that your new customers are going live with the solution and starting to get the benefit that led them to invest in that solution in the first place. So a lot of focus on that time to value, and how do you improve that and make it a more predictable, repeatable, and consistent experience for your customers.
Wonderful. And there's so much built into those kind of two goals, right? It seems like there's like as far as the profitability, that seems to be like more long term, right? And you think, okay, well, if I want to be profitable, then like when do I expect that to happen? And how many customers do I need? And how do I like position this? And so that's cool to think about. And then the more short term is like, all right, once they use it, how do we make it stick? How do we give them the value? How do we make sure that they stick with the subscription? And in this kind of space of like kind of like document workflow, like collaboration tool, I mean, there's a ton, right? I mean, there's like hundreds, thousands. So how do you compete? How do you stand out?
Yeah, I mean, M Files itself, there's a lot of differentiators especially from kind of a technical standpoint. So like they use metadata in order to organize the information, which makes it a lot easier to find what you're actually looking for, not having to go and click through folders and, oh, I found a document and okay, this says it's version 2, this is version 2 dash final, version 2 dash final dash ELB. So that's a differentiator that makes it a lot easier to find the information that you're looking for. Does that kind of answer your question in terms of how do you stand out? Or
Yeah, and there's different so like there's different sort of ways to stand out, right? There's like the standing out of like once they use it, it's like, hey, like this is really saving us time. But then many times there's like the awareness, right? If someone is maybe already using an existing solution, or they need to be like trained. So like is there anything noteworthy as far as like the educating your customers side, like when you're doing like your sales? Have you had to educate them, or is this like filling a need people are already looking for? Like what's the kind of the customers and conversion been like?
yeah, and I think that both at A Priori and at M Files, it is still very much a little bit of an evan- evangelical sale, right? So like they're not very well known. It's not Salesforce, so definitely some education that needs to be done. And also with both companies, we very much took kind of a land and expand approach. So both A Priori and M Files are very flexible. There's a lot of different capabilities. It's a very configurable product, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? It's great that you can address all these different needs across an entire enterprise, but then it becomes, okay, well, where do we focus, right? Your prospects can very much get into kind of analysis paralysis. And so we try to be very focused in terms of, okay, but what is your biggest problem right now? If you could pick one problem to solve, what would that be? And then focus the initial implementation on that. And then both at A Priori and at M Files, again, we created a services offering. We called it Expert Services. It's a subscription based service. So essentially, you purchase 4, 8, 24 hours per month of a dedicated consultant's time, and that's co-termed with the software subscription as well. That's great because it counts as recurring revenue, so it counts towards your ARR. Customers also love it as well because, like I said, these platforms they're very flexible and they can address a lot of different use cases across the enterprise. But we focus on one of those to start the implementation. And then by having these consistent touch points with the same consultant every month, it could be every week that you're meeting with them, we're able to do some of that education, right? And we're able to consult with them and understand, okay, we solved your biggest problem. Now what's your second biggest problem, right? Where else could M files be applied and deployed across the enterprise in order to get you more value? And then also you can leverage those hours in order to do the actual work that is needed to expand across the enterprise, whether that's additional configuration, integrations with other business systems. There's always going to be some training and adoption that we want to help with those hours as well. So that's been a great and also very kind of profitable services offering that customers love, and it helps to kind of drive that continued education, that expansion into other parts of the enterprise.
I love that. And it seems like by someone going this route and they have this expert consultant person putting in the hours of making everything work, it kind of shortcuts that time for the solution to stick with them. And also it means that like they don't need to have their own employee kind of learning so much of this. It just like you hit the ground running and you can start getting some work done. And so, you mentioned a little bit there about the going out and figuring out what people want, which I always find kind of interesting, right? Because like with software, there's like the architecture and the building and the coding, but then when you like try out features and see how people like it and ask them, and then you get all these answers and it's like not what you expected, and it's like surprising and it's exciting. There's some sort of magic in there. And so what sort of like surprises have you come across when you're saying things like you're figuring out what to focus, what to do to help them? Like what has really surprised you as far as what the customers have been telling you?
I think the biggest surprise, and this varies, would be kind of the lack of progress in terms of document management and workflow automation. So, and this is both based on my own experience, talking to peers that work at other companies. Obviously, my experience working with our customers. There's so many customers out there and so many companies where the way that they approach document and content and information management is so archaic. It's still local files and folders, maybe some shared drives. Some companies, especially if they're more mature, they'll have maybe some SharePoint sites that are set up, but really just so hard to find information. And I think that if we look at both where we are today and kind of where we see companies going, it's going to be much more kind of knowledge and information focused, right? Like companies being effective is going to be very dependent on how effectively they can find information, how effectively they can share knowledge across the company as well. So just the kind of how dated it is for so many companies has been a little bit surprising to me.
And why do you think that is? Is there just like lack of education, or they're afraid to move off the SharePoints and the shared drives, like with all these solutions and all this cloud and all these technology available and things we can just plug into? Like, why is there this bottleneck?
Yeah, I think it's two things. It's just people are comfortable with what they're used to. So just that inertia in terms of change. And then I think there is a little bit of a lack of visibility or lack of realization on exactly what the benefit can be of moving to something that is more effective and more efficient. So I think that a lot of times, especially leadership, they don't realize how inefficient their people are being.
Oh, interesting. Right. That yeah, they don't even know how good it can be or how bad it currently is, and perhaps they can't know it until they've actually made the change and taken the leap and seen how they find the documents faster, shortcut all this time, don't have to go and hunt around for these sorts of files. And so speaking to that, it's always fun to hear about a story where someone has really made your platform work. And I definitely don't expect you to like mention any names or anything like that, but do you have a fun like success story case study of someone using M files or a priori and just like, having a real clear like night and day before and after type transformation?
Yeah. And I guess I can speak to a priori. And again, I can't use specific customer names, but so what they offered at a priori is essentially cost and manufacturing simulation software. So you're able to take a 3D CAD file, read it into a priori. It'll analyze the geometry, tell you how it could be manufactured, how long it would take to manufacture it, how much it would cost. And there were so many customers out there that were doing none of that. So basically, they would have, it would be kind of marketing and sales would say, okay, for this product, this is what we think we can sell it for, and we have our margin that we need to make. So this is what we need to manufacture it for. And there was no way for the people that were designing the product to kind of predict if what they were designing was going to meet that target in terms of what it needs to cost to manufacture. So there was multiple customers where they were doing nothing. They were essentially flying blind. And then they gave their engineers and their sourcing professionals this tool, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, now I can do my job and be more effective in that.
Wonderful. And so like all of this sort of tells me that it's just we need to be aware of what is possible in our industry and these different software solutions. And it has me motivated just to go on YouTube and like look up different demos and just like see how different things are done, right? Because you might not even know that there are these sort of simulators, or that when you have like M files and you have like things like the audit trail or the like security and know who does what, like it's just there's a lot to know, a lot to learn, and so that's a cool sort of look into these companies that you worked at and the solutions that you built. And since this is the Scaling Secrets podcast, and you mentioned at the beginning that the number of employees have grown, what have you learned being around that? Because growing a company is scary, right? You work on bigger problems, bigger risks, more ways to go wrong, bigger amounts of money, more people. And so how do you navigate that, or what are your thoughts on, is there anything that you wish you'd known years ago, or just what do you have to share with us about some scaling secrets?
Yeah, I think one thing that, especially as I grew my own team, right, went from 4 people, so I was working directly with everyone on the team, had very regular interactions with them, to 30 plus people, only 4 direct reports. I think there was really 2 things that were very important to me, and it's not necessarily something I would do differently, but that I would make sure that I always do in the future. And so one is definitely making the coaching and mentoring a priority. And by doing that, you can really make sure that you have the right leaders in place, so that the individuals on the team are having the experiences that you want them to have, and are treating customers the way that you want to treat them. So that would be one that I think is very important, is to make that coaching and mentoring a priority, and to make time for that. And then the other is especially as I became a first time kind of manager of managers, is I didn't realize the kind of weight that my actions and kind of the things that I said had across the organization. So just being really conscious of, people pay a lot more attention to what you're doing and what you're saying, and you have a responsibility to really drive the culture that you want in the company through your actions.
Wonderful. Set a good example. And that's one of those lessons that sometimes it takes a few years to learn, that people are watching what you're doing and saying. And if it's, if you're negative or if you're passive aggressive, then if it doesn't affect just you, it affects other people, especially when your organization grows. And so when you mentioned about coaching and mentoring, like what does that look like? Because I'm imagining like recurring meetings or asking someone like how their project is going or if they need help. But you tell me, like, what does the coaching and mentoring process look like?
Yeah, and to me, one thing that's very important is to separate performance management from coaching and mentoring and growth and development, and making sure that those are two separate conversations. They're both very important, but really you want to have one conversation around performance, which is like how are you doing in your role today? Are you meeting our expectations? And then have a separate conversation maybe a week later about growth and development, which is more, where do you want to get in your career? What's important for you to continue to grow as a leader. So that was always something that was very important to me. And then making those kind of touch points in terms of those growth and development goals a part of your regular kind of one-on-one cadence. It's very easy to have those growth and development discussions once a year, and you set some goals, and then the day-to-day becomes the priority, and you get 6 months out and you go, we haven't really done anything here. So making sure that you just kind of check on those on a monthly basis. And then I also have set aside time, specific kind of mentoring calls on a monthly basis for the people that I'm coaching and mentoring, and having those be separate from, kind of one regular weekly one-on-one where we're just talking about business.
Those are some great insights. That number one, the joke of yearly goals is like the New Year's resolution thing, right? Where the problem is that there's too much space between the check-ins, and then as a result, it's too big of a goal, and then it's not followed up on, and then the goal isn't taken seriously, and then it's literally a waste of time. But by kind of shrinking the scope somewhat and making it more reasonable and making it like monthly instead of yearly, then that's more of a recipe for success there. And then also, I think an important like in a life and business lesson there is to set aside these blocks of time for this kind of more long-term stuff that is important but not urgent, right? And you hear about when people like set aside time just kind of to think about the next steps or to work on content, then it seems like that's also important, just to set aside this time to have these meetings with your team and kind of work on the more like long-term kind of growth goals and all those sorts of things. And so you said you've done this for 12 years. You've kind of been through all these fun adventures. Is there a time when you really messed up? Was there like a real like stressful period when you were just like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how to proceed, I'm not sure how to continue? Does anything come to mind like that as far as just the stress, the struggle?
I don't know that there was a time where I was ever really frozen. I was fortunate early in my time at a priori to have a really great coach and mentor. So anytime that I kind of felt like, hey, I'm not sure what to do next, I had a great relationship with that person. I could go to them and get some advice and just kind of vent. So that always was really helpful in terms of me not just being completely frozen and like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then in terms of the stress, yeah, like moving to Japan, the other side of the world, in the middle of COVID with a 2-year-old, and my wife was like 4 or 5 months pregnant. That definitely was super stressful.
Well, tell us about that. I mean, what was the culture shock like, or how did you
Yeah,
adapt to all that?
yeah. I mean, it was culture shock for sure, and I had already been doing some business with Japanese customers and colleagues. So from a business standpoint, I understood it a little bit, but not from a kind of day-to-day life standpoint. And I always tell people, like, when many of us think of Japan, we think, oh, it's so futuristic, right? Like there's robots bringing you your drinks at cafes, and there's sushi belt conveyor belt sushi, and you get on a bullet train and you're going 300 miles per hour across the country. And there are so many things that are very advanced in Japan, but then there are things that are like 25 years behind. So for example, like if you want to renew your residence card or your driver's license, you can't do that online. You have to go to the city hall, and you get a piece of paper with a number on it, and you go to a desk and they give you another piece of paper and you fill that out, and then you get another ticket and go to the next desk. So they kind of compartmentalize what's really advanced and what's not. And that was the biggest kind of shock for me.
It sounds like they need to use M files or use some sort of software to modernize that, right? That there's still the human factor holding some of this up.
I think that Japan might be one of the only countries in the world where they still have a large amount of fax machine sales.
Interesting. Well, all the
Yeah.
more reason to be adaptable and to say, hey, well, I wish that there was an app to change my residency or just go and online and fill in a form, but can't change it, have to deal with it, have to figure out a way to navigate the system, and nothing's perfect. And you're a software guy, you know this, right? There's always some kind of debugging, or there's always like some system won't interface with another, and that's just the mess that is life. And so, as we're winding down our conversation here, what are some next steps if someone wants to contact you, talk to you, Mr. Erik Borreson, or they want to look into a priori or M files? What type of person would do that, and where should they go?
Yeah, I would say, like, if you'd like to contact me, definitely feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get in contact with me. And the same if you'd like to learn more about whether it's a priori or M files. If you go to my LinkedIn, obviously you can look at my experience and then click on the company pages, and there'll be some great information there. Obviously, links to those companies' websites where you can find a lot of information, but also you can see, based on the company page feeds, kind of what's been going on with the company, some great customer case studies as well.
Very cool. And it's all online now today, isn't it? It used to be like there was
Yes.
that period of time where like people would kind of sometimes post to Facebook, but you weren't sure if it was like personal or business. But LinkedIn, it seems like these last few years with it really taken off, you can definitely do your research. And these people post all the time about what their company's doing, working on, thinking about. And it's a great way to get inside someone's head and see if a conversation makes sense. And you can find Erik Borreson on LinkedIn. That's Erik, last name Borreson, and then m-files.com. And then what's the website for a priori?
Uh, just www.apriori.com, and that's APRIORI.
Very cool. And so that's the links to the websites. But as Erik said, it's also fun to click around on LinkedIn and go to those exact company pages and see what they're talking about, see what problems they're currently solving. And so since we're near the end of our conversation here, Mr. Erik, I like to kind of stump my guest a little bit, put them on the spot. Instead of just saying, hey, nice to meet you, goodbye, I like to ask them for a fun quote or lesson that has helped them, that can help us. So does anything come to your mind as far as a fun quarter lesson? Could be business, motivational, personal, just what has helped you through the dark times? What do you think could help us?
Yeah, I think for me, both in business life and personal life, it's been get comfortable being uncomfortable. So whether that's saying, yeah, sure, I'll move with my 2-year old and my 5-month pregnant wife to the other side of the world, or definitely, try to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, and that's really what you need in order to grow as a person, to grow your business as well.
100%. I agree with you. Embrace the roller coaster, the adventure, the journey. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And check out Erik Borreson on LinkedIn. Check out m-files.com if you say, our company needs to get more uncomfortable and we need to get some of this document management, collaboration, AI dialed in. m-files.com. Erik Borreson, wonderful speaking with you today.
You too, Robert. Thanks so much for having me on.